y'all, and welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited, the podcast where we're talking all about research, writing, and PhD tips because my name is Dr. Mandy. I'm a researcher and an academic editor, and I want to help you live your best PhD life. So, today on Dr. Mandy Unedited, we are talking about a lot of juicy topics. All right, so our research reality check topic of the week is what I would do to make sure that I'm going to make money after my PhD. So I'm going to share some tips on things that you can do now in your PhD program to help you out a little bit later down the line when you're searching for a job. For our Write It Right segment today, when we talk all about how to write things academically, we are going to talk about quotations and how to use them in academic writing. And then for our PhD tip of the day, I'm going to tell you some things that you can start writing for your dissertation or your thesis while you are waiting to either start it or waiting for that tricky part of all the ethical approvals to start your research. But before we get into all this stuff, let's do some housekeeping things. As you know, I have recently started a Discord channel called the People PhD Podcast. PhD stands for people pursuing higher degrees. And that link is going to be in the description. This is a place where people who are pursuing higher academic degrees can come and ask questions. We have other PhDs and experts in there to help mentor you, guide you, and get you where you need to be. So if you find yourself alone on your PhD journey, make sure that you check out the People PhD Pod over on Discord. Number two is that we are going to take a break from Dr. Mandy Unedited. I know, it's not going anywhere, it's coming back, but today will be the last episode of Dr. Mandy Unedited for this year, and I am going to resume the podcast on February 4th. The reason why I'm doing this is because I am currently eyeballs deep in a very intense, very short research project, and a lot of the big things for this project are due over Christmas and at the end of the first month of the new year. And don't worry, I will still be accepting editing requests. I will still be active on Discord and on TikTok, where you can find me at Life with Dr. Mandy. It's just that the podcast does take up a pretty good chunk of my time every week, and so something's gotta give, y'all. So to hopefully, I've been really excited about the way I've been developing the podcast recently, and I really want to make sure that I have time to bring you some like really good and informative tips and ideas. So I've decided, yes, I will be resuming on February the 4th, and these next 2 months I will be just researching away. So in the meantime, if you haven't checked out all the episodes of the podcast, I've got like 24-ish episodes now, so that might be something to keep you busy for a little bit. All right, let's move on to the Goss of the day. The Goss segment is just to tell my non-academic friends what I am up to, because they sometimes like to listen and hear about my life. And so today I'm going to talk about it's finally gotten cold in the UK, and that might not seem like a big deal to y'all, but if you maybe this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, I'm an American living in the UK. Before I moved to the UK, I spent a lot of time in the Midwest of the United States, and I could not deal with the freezing temperatures or the amount of snow that would just fall all the time during the winter. I literally almost got fired from a job one time because I couldn't get my car shoveled out of like 6 feet of snow quickly enough to get there on time, and they hadn't even shoveled the roads yet. So I was just super fed up with it, and that led to my decision to move to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is a beachy town, and the weather is nice and hot, and there's no snow in the winter. So, of course, about 2 years after I moved to Wilmington, I moved to the UK because I met I met a man, and I thought I was gonna live and die in Wilmington, but fate is just a funny thing. So, fortunately, in the UK where I live in the Southwest, and the weather is, not that much different from North Carolina. It doesn't get as hot in the summer, which is something I kind of miss, but in the winter time, the temperature is pretty much the same as in Wilmington, and we don't get a lot of snow. We got a little dusting of snow here last week, and that's fine with me. If I don't see snow for the rest of my life, I can live with it. But I think one of the funny things is in the UK is that during the summer, if there is a heat wave, and again, like the heat wave is not like, a North Carolina heat wave. It's not like 90 or 100. It's like 80, right? Which I can't tell you what off the top of my head that is in Celsius right now. I'm sorry. But the funny thing is that like everyone, is like, oh, like the air conditioning would be a nice thing. As a lot of places in Europe don't have air conditioning. For me, I find it really nice because, it's one of my sensory issues is cold air. Like I can't even sleep if I'm breathing on myself because my breath is like a little bit cooler than than the temperature in the room. So for me, I don't mind being in like the hot sweatiness, but it's really funny because now in the winter time, now that it's gotten colder, it's like a contest to see how long we can wait out having to turn our heat on. So yeah, the temperature has finally dropped this week, and everyone's bundled up in their houses. I don't know. I just turned the heat on maybe for like 30 minutes, and that's enough just to kind of like take the chill off in the house. But I think it's really funny how many conversations I've had with people saying like, "Oh, I finally had to beg my partner to turn the heat on today," or something like that. I don't know. I just think it's really funny because, we were all worried about the heat in the summer, and now we're just like completely avoiding it in the winter time. Who knows? But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our research reality check segment. And so, yeah, today I want to talk about, a lot of people are worried about after the PhD, how are you going to make money as a researcher? How are you going to get a job? And, I think personally, I've been really successful in those things after the PhD, but there are definitely some things that I would say would make life a little bit easier if I had done them during my PhD program. So, I want to give you some tips of some things that you can do now while you're doing the PhD or the doctorate or the higher degree, what have you, that will really, really help you out in the future. So, the first thing would be publishing papers. Okay, so one of the things that I mean, it's kind of annoying because I'd like to spend my time on other things, but your worth as a researcher is based off of, your publication status. And that's something that I didn't start working on until after I got my PhD. And, like one of the differences I find between US and UK PhDs is that the UK tends to do a lot more of this during the PhD. Depends on the program. And then in the US, same thing, kind of depends on the program. But a lot of times, the PhD can kind of just be training, and then afterwards you'll go and work on publications and things like that. However, I would definitely recommend going ahead, no matter who you are, where you are, and working on, writing and submitting papers now. And, if you're kind of like, well, I don't really have any research, like, what am I going to do about it? You can still start writing, easy things like literature reviews or, perspective pieces. And so I think that this would be really, really helpful to, yeah, start establishing your status as a researcher and not having to worry and scramble and get a bunch of stuff published later. Because yeah, one of the realities is that, if you go into research and you're working on research projects, you do have to wait on other people, and it can take a long time to get publications in. Like I did this research project that ended over 8 months ago now, and we're still working on papers. Nothing has been published from that yet, you know what I mean? So I have like a bunch of research papers that need to be published, but they are not, because I'm waiting on other people and, approvals and what have you. So if you can go ahead and just start publishing stuff on your own now, it will really put you ahead of the game. The other thing that I want to talk about is grant writing. So, this is something that's really, really tricky, but it's another kind of status thing. People like to see that you are applying for grants and bringing in money into your university or your organization. So, one of the things that I would focus on with that is learn what is available at universities or research organizations to help you, because a lot of people don't realize that there are often departments within your research organization that their job is to help you, even from like the ground up on developing a research project and getting grants for it. And there are other things that you need to consider, like, financial rules. I just learned about that through some professional development myself this year, that, there sometimes when you apply for grants, there's laws that, you have to abide by when it comes to saying how much money you need for certain things. And so your organization has a department maybe that has to check those things over. And so, secondly, on the grant writing topic, it would be really, really important to, start learning how to think like the person that's going to be reviewing your grant. One of the issues that I see with grants all the time is people, getting their stuff kicked back for a second or a third revision. And so, it's really important to kind of think ahead and mitigate what the issues might be. So think about all those like possible limitations and things like that, and go ahead and practice writing them into your grant applications. Another thing that I would do is, yeah, learn some coding and AI. Regardless if you are a quantitative or a qualitative person, I am seeing so much information come out on, across various fields and any field. And so I think that the big money is in coding and AI topics. So if you have some knowledge on, yeah, like how to code or how to work with AI systems, that would be a huge bonus. Another thing is networking. I say this all the time, but look, I cannot underscore the importance of networking. Y'all go ahead and meet people, learn people, get the links, because for me, I have learned that the way to stay employed is through who you know and not necessarily applying for jobs. Of course, I apply for jobs when I need to, but most of my jobs, in fact, the only job that I've actually applied for that I've had was my very first research role. Every research role that I've had after that has been a result of networking. And then I think finally ish, I would get to be an expert on data analysis and methods and popular frameworks within your field, because these are some of the particular things that I have found when interviewing for jobs that people really are poignant on having expertise in. And so the way that you can really develop these things is go to like pre-project proposal meetings, meetings where they're developing the idea of a research project, the methodology of a research project, and go ahead and learn how to do those things. Put that on your resume, because that's what employers like to see, is that you have specific knowledge in specific ways of research. And then on like the framework side of things, if you start to become an expert on a certain framework that could maybe be malleable across different fields, that's also helpful to open up your prospects in the job world, so like you don't have to only work within your field, or you can work cross-disciplinary. So yeah, those are just some things that I kind of wish I had done before. I do it a lot now, but it would definitely be helpful to get started on those things sooner rather than later. Okay, so now let's talk about our Write It Right section of the day. Today I'm going to talk about quotations, because all of the things that I talk about in this section are really just like consistent mistakes that I see people make when they are giving me their manuscripts to edit. So, some places within your dissertation that you would see quotations are a lot of times when you're explaining, like, the background, the introduction, or maybe, referring to certain texts in your methodology. And so, another place would be, especially, your findings section. And it's really important in your findings section that you, if you're a qualitative person at least, that you are using a lot of quotes directly from your participants, because this is what helps validate your research, and what makes it trustworthy is to show directly where you're getting that information from. I see a lot of people, just try to write and ignore going back and looking through for quotations, but especially in your findings section, you need to have lots and lots of quotes. Let's talk about how to do quotations. So you have like two basic kind of forms of quotations. And of course, I'm always speaking in APA 7, y'all, so it will be a little bit different between formatting types. But you have short quotations and you have long quotations, and there's different formatting for each of those, okay? So short quotations are quotations that are under 40 words, and these are simply going to be, quotation marks that you're going to use within your narrative. So, for example, if you say, Smith 2020, put the year there, argued that, quote, participatory methods empower communities, quote, that's a short quote. You're just going to put quotation marks around that. And then at the end of the last quotation mark, in parentheses, you are going to put the page. So you're going to put the letter P, dot, page number, close parentheses, period. Okay. If you didn't, I used an example where the year citation happened after saying Smith. So if you used a quote where you didn't directly cite the person in the beginning of the paragraph, then yes, you would put the in parentheses after the last quotation, you would put the name, comma, year, comma, P dot, page number, close parentheses, period. Now, the issue that I often see is with long quotations or block quotations. And so block quotations, again, are longer than 40 words. They are meant to be basically on a new paragraph. They're indented about half an inch, so it's kind of looks like it's on the same line as like if you would indent a paragraph. And so all of the lines in that quote are going to be indented that same like half inch over. In a block quotation, you are not going to put any quotation quotation marks at all. And then at the end, you are going to put a period where your sentence ends, and then you are going to put parentheses, person's name, comma, year, comma, p dot, page number, comma, no period or punctuation after that. That is another thing that I see people have a little issue with. So yeah, in block quotations, you're going to put punctuation at the end of the sentence like you normally would, but then your parenthetical citation is going to happen afterwards with no punctuation at the end. Moving on to our PhD tip of the week, let's talk about what you can write while you are waiting. And this is something I've been talking a lot about on TikTok, and I think a lot of people find it beneficial because a lot of people just want to get on with the writing process. But sometimes, yeah, you have to wait for the development of your dissertation or thesis, or sometimes you get to the part where you've written, your proposal chapters and you're waiting for those approvals for the ethics to get started on your research. So there are several parts of your dissertation or thesis that you can start to write either, before you really officially start the dissertation process, or in those places where you find yourself kind of in a limbo and waiting. And so one of those things is the literature review, and I talked a little bit about this last week, I believe. But the literature review, is something that you can start writing way before, because a lot of times people have problems meeting that, minimum page number for their literature reviews. And so go back and check out last week's episode where I talked about some tips that you can do to kind of, like get started on the literature review. But that's one of the things. The other things is the overviews in each of your chapters. Of course, any of these things will probably develop slightly as you develop your research. So, don't write these things and think like, okay, I'm never going to touch it again, but at least you have, a draft there. With your overviews, you don't have to be too creative about it. I see a lot of people trying to fumble around and make overviews seem, like interesting or something like that. But really, at the end of the day, your overview is just going to be a sentence about what the chapter is about, maybe like 3 sentences about, what they're going to find in the chapter, and then a sentence about why these things matter to your research. And remember, your overviews, check your guidelines, of course, but they're typically going to be written in present tense as well. The other thing you can work on is your theoretical framework or your conceptual framework. So once you've decided what maybe like your theory or your conceptual framework is, you can go ahead and start writing that section about, how it developed, why you're using it for your research. I think you typically, in the versions of dissertations and theses I've seen, it's typically in the literature review section. You can go ahead and start writing kind of like a background, essentially, of your theoretical or conceptual framework. Another thing is, you can go ahead and start writing a background for your topic in general. So once you have a topic in mind that is solid, you can go ahead and talk about, the background of it, why it's a problem, what you're addressing, the gaps and things like that. That might be something that you have to wait until you develop your idea a little bit further. But once you have that idea, go ahead and write a background on it. And then the last thing is something that I think people don't think about very often is the researcher positionality sections that you would find, I believe, in your methodology chapter. So these might involve little sections like epistemology, ontology, axiology. I don't know if I said any of those words, Right, but they're typically like these little, maybe like paragraph or two sections that you can go ahead and start writing. Trust me, yeah, if you get to work, if you try to work smarter or not harder on the dissertation or thesis writing process, life is going to go a lot more smoother for you. So I hope that these tips help you out. Finally, let's move on to our questions of the week, y'all. Last week, I asked, what are some things that slow you down in the research process? And I got a lot of different answers on this one. I think probably the number one answer is a chair that refuses to guide you. And this is so frustrating because I hear it all the time. I'm not sure, what the deal is, but I think that sometimes, chairs get hired. They probably are hired to, oversee a certain amount of people. They might have like either a really hard workload and they don't have a lot of time to, pay a lot of specific attention to you. But then other times, yeah, they do tend to sometimes, unfortunately, just take the paycheck and have the numbers, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to have the guidance. So I think that, yeah, not having a good chair or a supervisor can definitely be a hindrance. And so that's why I tell people, yeah, like get to networking, find your community. That's why, yeah, I've created things like the PhD pod where you have that resource that you can go to and find answers, because that's probably the number one answer that I see a lot of times. Other answers that I got was someone said, not enough Dr. Mandy videos. Okay, look, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I appreciate that you like watching them. And then yeah, someone else said hating my PhD topic, my funding, and my visa problems. I think that funding is like kind of another thing, especially if you are on a visa for a PhD, if you're studying in a foreign country. That can be really difficult. I think I didn't have funding myself, unfortunately. That would have been an amazing thing. However, I think that in some cases people get low funding, and so you're kind of expected to work almost full time on a PhD, but you don't have the funding to really support yourself. That's frustrating. And then, yeah, sometimes I think people have to stress about whether they can stay in that country and continue the PhD because of their visa requirements all the time. And then sometimes, the visa requirement might say that you can't work or do certain things, which throws a wrench in there as well. So, yeah, I definitely can feel for all of those answers. That is quite a frustrating set of things to have to worry about. Now, this week's question is going to be, what is one skill your PhD gave you that has nothing to do with your research? So I will be asking this question on TikTok and Discord also. So, you can feel free to answer this question either in the comments or on those platforms, and I will be discussing the answers next week. In the meantime, y'all, look, I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss you, but you're gonna see me again on February the 4th. And again, if you can't get enough of this wonderful high-pitched voice of mine, you can go find me on Discord or TikTok. If you need any editing services, I'm starting to get pretty busy for the end of this year, but I try to take as many manuscripts as I can. So you can get a hold of me through my email, and that's mandykf@gmail.com. So MANDIE kangaroo foxtrot @gmail.com. Or you can reach out to me through my website, www.drmandyedits. Doctor is spelled out, edits is with an S. Okay, so in the meantime, go drink a reasonable amount of coffee, not too much. Caffeine is bad for you. Get some work done, and I will see you in the new year. Okay, see ya, bye.